Okay, so um, you've given us just a mountain of information about this whole long-term care thing.
Yeah.
Seems like you've really been trying to understand, like, every angle of this,
Yeah, definitely.
insurance and the care options and even all the emotional stuff that goes with it. I
Absolutely.
mean, it can be overwhelming, right?
Hugely.
But here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
We've got, personal stories from people who are actually living this stuff as caregivers. And we've got like financial advice that actually makes sense. Yeah, not all the jargon.
Yeah.
And we even have some tips on how to like talk to your family about this stuff. Because
Right.
that can be the hardest part sometimes.
It is, for sure.
Just even getting the conversation started.
Well, and what's so fascinating to me about this deep dive is that it goes beyond just the numbers
Yeah.
and the facts and figures.
Hmm.
We're really looking at the human impact of all this
Oh, absolutely.
for both the people receiving the care and those who are giving it. So by connecting all of this to the bigger picture, I think people are going to be much better equipped to make some good decisions
Right.
for themselves and for their loved ones down the road.
And one number from all this research like really threw me.
Okay.
70% of people over 65 will need long-term care.
It's a big number.
I mean, that's most of us, right?
It is. Yeah, we're all living longer, which is great.
Yeah.
But it also means, we need to be prepared
Right.
for the very real possibility that we're going to need extra help as we get older.
Okay, so I got to admit, I always kind of assumed that Medicare would just kind of cover all that.
Uh-huh.
Isn't that what it's for?
Oh, that's a big misconception that a lot of people have.
Really?
Medicare does cover some skilled nursing facility care,
Okay.
but it's very specific and it's really limited.
Oh.
So think of it as like short-term help after you've been in the hospital.
Okay.
If you need rehab after surgery or something like that. It's
No.
not really meant for ongoing long-term care needs.
Right. So wait, so if my dad needed help with like everyday things,
Yeah.
like getting dressed or, taking a shower,
Yeah,
Medicare wouldn't cover that.
that's right. Those are what we call activities of daily living.
Ah.
And typically Medicare doesn't cover those.
That seems wild.
It is, and that's really where long-term care insurance
Right.
comes into the picture.
And so that brings us to this whole debate
Yeah,
about whether long-term care insurance is even worth it.
right.
I mean, some of these sources are totally for it.
Mhm.
Others say you're better off just, saving and investing the money yourself. It's really confusing.
I understand the confusion because it's a big decision.
It is.
And there's no one magic answer that fits everybody.
Right.
There are valid arguments on both sides.
Like in that long-term care insurance 101 video,
Yeah.
I thought they made a really good point about how, insurance can protect your assets
Uh-huh.
and it gives you more control over your care choices down the road.
Absolutely. Having a long-term care policy can offer real peace of mind.
Yeah.
Because you know that you won't have to drain your savings to pay for care.
Right, right.
And it could also give you the option of getting care at home
Okay.
or in an assisted living facility rather than, having to rely on Medicaid,
Right.
which often only covers nursing home care.
Okay. But then I watched that video from Mike Ballou,
Uh-huh.
and he's totally against long-term care insurance.
Yeah.
His example about, Bob, who just invests the money that he would have spent on premiums,
Yeah.
that really got me thinking, like, maybe self-insuring IS smarter?
It's a compelling argument.
Yeah.
The idea is that if you invest wisely,
Yeah.
you could potentially have enough money to cover your own long-term care needs.
Okay.
But that does take a lot of financial discipline
Right.
and some risk tolerance.
Yeah.
Because the market goes up and down.
Right. And what if you're not, a financial expert?
Yeah.
That seems really risky.
It can be.
And plus, there's no guarantee that you're going to stay healthy enough to keep working and keep investing.
You're right. There are so many factors to consider.
Like a million.
It really is not a one-size-fits-all situation.
No.
Things like your age and your health and family history, even whether you have family nearby who can help.
Right.
All of that plays a role in making the decision.
So you can't just decide this based on like, watching a video.
Right.
You really need to do your research.
Definitely.
And maybe even talk to like a financial advisor who really understands all this.
Absolutely. This is a big decision with big implications for your future.
Totally.
So getting professional guidance to figure out what's best for you
Right.
is a really smart move.
Okay, so you mentioned something earlier about hybrid policies.
Yes.
What are those?
So hybrid policies are kind of like a combo deal.
Okay.
They combine life insurance with long-term care benefits.
Oh.
So it's kind of like one policy,
Yeah.
but with multiple ways that it can help you out.
Okay, so if you need long-term care,
Yeah.
You can tap into those benefits,
Right.
but if you don't, then your family gets like a death benefit.
Exactly.
Just like a regular life insurance policy.
That's right. It gives you a lot more flexibility
Right.
than just a traditional long-term care policy.
And that whole idea of owning versus renting your contract
Yes.
from that Financial Fastlane video, that makes so much sense here.
It really does.
Because with a hybrid policy, you're actually building cash value. That's yours,
Right.
even if you never end up needing long-term care.
Exactly.
That's really smart. Okay, so let's say we figured out the whole insurance thing.
Okay.
What else can people do to prepare for, potentially needing long-term care?
Yeah.
I mean, assisted living comes up a lot in these sources.
It does. Assisted living facilities are definitely a popular option.
Okay.
And they offer a pretty wide range of services,
It's
from help with basic stuff like you were talking about earlier
Yeah.
to specialized memory care units for people with Alzheimer's or dementia.
And there are so many different types of facilities.
There are some are like, fancy apartments,
Yeah.
and some are much more basic. And
Right.
the costs and the amenities vary a lot,
They do.
which is why it's really important to do your research
Yeah.
and visit places in person.
Oh, like actually go.
Go see them.
Yeah.
Just like they recommend in that Atria Senior Living video.
I like how they really emphasize that in that video.
Yeah.
Don't just like read a brochure
Right.
or look at their website.
You got to go see it.
Yeah, you really have to get a feel for the environment,
Yeah.
talk to the staff, see what kind of activities they offer. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a big decision
It's a huge decision.
where you're going to, potentially live.
It's about finding a place where your loved one is going to feel comfortable
Right.
and well cared for.
And speaking of comfortable, a lot of people really want to just age in place,
Of course.
stay in their homes, as long as possible.
It's a natural desire.
Yeah. I mean, home is familiar. It's where all your memories are.
Yeah.
It just feels safe.
It does. But we also have to be realistic about the practicalities.
Okay.
Can the house be modified, to accommodate changing needs?
Right.
Are there family members who can realistically provide care?
Yeah.
And how are you going to deal with caregiver burnout?
That's a big one.
It's huge.
Because as much as we might want to think we can handle it all ourselves,
Right.
caregiver burnout is a real thing.
Is incredibly common.
Yeah, and it can be devastating.
Absolutely. It can have a devastating impact on both the caregiver
Yeah.
and the person they're caring for.
That Atria Senior Living video had some really good resources for that.
They did things like respite care and support groups.
Yeah.
Those can be lifesavers for overwhelmed caregivers.
And even just acknowledging it.
Yeah.
The emotional and practical burdens of caregiving.
Absolutely. Just talking about it
Uh,
is a huge step.
Which brings us to another challenge. How do you even talk to your loved ones about long-term care?
Right.
I mean, nobody really wants to think about needing care.
No.
Let alone discuss it, openly.
It's the last thing anybody wants to talk about.
Yeah, I remember trying to bring this up with my own parents,
Uh-huh.
and it was like hitting a brick wall.
Oh, yeah.
They just refused to talk about it.
I hear that a lot.
It was so frustrating.
It's a very common reaction.
Yeah, but there are ways to approach the conversation,
Yeah.
to make it less scary.
There are.
That your legacy legal care video had some really good tips on that.
It did.
Like framing it as the doctor's concern instead of yours.
Right.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, it takes the pressure off.
It does.
And it might make them more open to talking about it.
Right, because it's not you nagging them.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
coming from a medical professional.
Right, and starting small, like maybe suggesting a meal visit
Yeah.
at a facility or an overnight stay.
Small steps.
Yeah, not like, you have to move here forever.
Mhm.
Just try it out.
Exactly. It's about dipping your toes in the water
Yeah.
rather than diving in head first.
Right, it makes the whole thing feel less overwhelming.
Right. It's about planting a seed
Okay.
and opening up those lines of communication.
Yeah.
It's about creating a safe space to have a dialogue
Yeah.
and explore options together as a family.
I love that. I mean, this whole deep dive is packed with really useful information.
It is.
But I think the biggest takeaway for me
Yeah.
is we need to start thinking about this now,
Yeah.
even if we're not ready to make any decisions.
The sooner the better.
Right? Just start thinking about it.
Absolutely.
Because knowledge is power.
It is.
And the more we know,
Yeah.
the better prepared we're going to be
Right.
to deal with all of this, when the time comes.
It makes the whole process a lot less stressful.
Way less stressful. And speaking of navigating this whole thing,
Yeah.
it really struck me that none of the sources we looked at
Uh-huh.
really talked about advocating for policy changes.
That's interesting.
I mean, if 70% of us are going to need long-term care,
Right.
shouldn't we be like demanding better solutions as a society?
It's a great question. You know, it really raises this bigger issue
Yeah.
of what can we do collectively
Yeah.
to address this challenge?
Yeah.
Are we doing enough as a society to support older adults?
Right, because it feels like there's this massive gap
There is.
between like the need for long-term care
Yeah.
and the resources that are actually available to people.
It's a significant gap, and it's something we need to talk about and figure out solutions for.
Like urgently.
Yes, the costs of care are skyrocketing.
Yeah.
You know, families are struggling.
Yeah.
We don't have good insurance options.
Right.
These are all systemic issues that we
Yeah.
need to be addressing.
Maybe this deep dive is like the spark
I hope so.
that starts a bigger conversation.
Me too.
It's definitely got me thinking.
That's great.
That's for sure.
Well, I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, you've hit on something really important there. I think it's like we get so caught up in all the details,
Yeah.
the finances and the facilities and all that, and we forget about the human side of this.
Yeah. Like, what does a good life even look like?
Yeah,
You know,
right.
when you need extra help.
Exactly. And that's where defining your values comes in.
Okay.
You know, it's truly important to you.
Yeah.
Is it staying independent as long as possible?
Yeah.
Is it staying connected to your community?
Right.
Having things you enjoy doing, you know?
Yeah. And it's one thing to say, I want to age in place,
Right.
but making that happen, I mean, that's a whole other story.
It is.
How do you connect those values, you know,
Right.
to actual choices about care?
Well, you're right. It takes planning and it takes resources, and you have to be willing to adapt.
Yeah.
So if somebody really values their independence, you know,
Yeah.
maybe exploring some home modifications would be key.
Okay.
You know, things like grab bars in the bathroom or widening doorways for wheelchairs.
Those are great examples.
You know, things like that.
Yeah. And if staying social is really important,
Yeah.
maybe living in a community where there are amenities and activities and stuff would be better.
Exactly. And that Argentum video about assisted living,
Yeah.
that really stood out to me because they weren't just talking about caregiving.
Right.
They were showcasing a whole lifestyle.
I loved that part of it too.
Yeah.
Like they showed residents doing all kinds of things.
Right. Guardian art classes.
Yeah.
You know,
It looked fun.
it did.
Like a really vibrant place to live.
Yeah.
Not just a place to get care.
Right. And that's the ideal, isn't it?
Yeah.
To find that place where you feel supported and respected and connected
Right.
and where your needs are met with, you know, dignity and compassion.
But finding that place, I mean,
Yeah.
that can be really daunting.
It is.
There's so many options. Like, how
Yeah.
do you even start?
That's why research is so important.
Yeah.
And actually visiting these places in person, don't just rely on what you see online.
Right.
Talk to people who live there. You know, observe the staff.
Yeah.
See how they interact with people. Get a feel for the place.
It's almost like dating.
It is.
You wouldn't commit to somebody
Right.
just based on, looking at their profile picture.
Exactly.
You got to spend time with them, get to know them,
Right. See if you're compatible.
see if you click.
Right. I love that analogy. And just like with dating, you know, first impressions really matter.
Yeah.
Pay attention to the little things like how clean the facility is,
Right.
how friendly the staff are, the
Yeah.
quality of the food.
Yeah, because all those little details, I mean,
Yeah.
they can really make a big difference in your quality of life.
They can. And don't forget, it's not just about the physical environment.
Right.
The emotional and social support that's available,
Yeah.
that's just as important.
Are there opportunities to socialize with other residents?
Mm-hmm.
Are there activities that you actually enjoy doing? Is the staff, do they care about you as a person?
Those things make a huge difference.
Yeah, they do.
You nailed it.
It's about more than just receiving care.
Yeah.
It's about living a life that's meaningful and fulfilling,
Absolutely.
even as you get older.
And that brings us back to those values
Right.
that we were talking about.
Yeah, like what makes life meaningful?
Right.
I mean, it's different for everybody.
There's no right or wrong answer.
No.
It's about figuring out what matters most to you
Yeah.
and then making a plan that supports those values.
And those can change over time, right?
Of course.
What's important to you in your 50s
Yeah.
might
Think-
not be the same in your 80s.
Exactly. You got to be flexible and
Yeah.
adaptable. You
Mhm.
know, be open to new possibilities
Yeah.
and willing to adjust our plans.
As our needs change.
Absolutely.
Which is why having these conversations early and often is so important.
It is.
And not just with, your family and your loved ones,
Right.
but with yourself too.
Yes, it's an ongoing process
Yeah.
of self-discovery and reflection.
It really is.
And it's never too early to start thinking about these things.
I think this deep dive has really shown me how complex this is.
It is.
Long-term care is so much more than just policies and numbers.
It's about real people
Yeah.
and their relationships and their hopes and their fears.
And it's about recognizing, we're all in this together.
We are.
Like, as individuals, as families, as a society,
Yes.
we have a responsibility to care for each other
Absolutely.
and to create a world where, getting older isn't something to be afraid of
Right.
or brushed aside.
It's a natural part of life.
Yeah, it is.
And it's valuable.
That's beautifully said.
Heck yeah.
That's a vision worth striving for.
It is.
Speaking of striving, we can't talk about this
Yeah.
without talking about the people who are doing the heavy lifting.
The caregivers.
The caregivers.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Unsung heroes
Right.
who are providing the vast majority of long-term care.
In this country.
Yeah. It's easy to get lost in the weeds.
It is.
All the insurance and the different facilities.
Yeah.
But we can't forget about the human beings
Right.
who are providing the care.
Yes.
And so often those caregivers,
Family members.
family members who aren't being paid.
Unpaid. Yeah, it's amazing the statistics.
Yeah.
I think over 53 million Americans are providing unpaid care.
That's a huge number.
For loved ones, it's a massive workforce
That nobody really sees.
that nobody sees.
Yeah.
And it's so important.
And it's not just the number of people doing it.
Right.
It's the toll that it takes.
Yes.
Emotionally, physically, even financially.
Absolutely.
We heard from some actual caregivers, in these sources.
We did.
And their stories are just, they're inspiring and heartbreaking at the same time.
They are. They really reveal the love and dedication that
Yeah.
these caregivers have.
So much.
But they also show the challenges,
Yeah.
the exhaustion, the isolation, the financial strain.
Like in that Today Show segment,
Right. Mm-hmm.
when Amy Goyer talked about her own experience in
Yeah.
taking care of her parents,
Yes.
she really emphasized how important it is
Yeah.
to have all your documents and information organized
Ahead of time.
in advance.
Yes.
Yeah, it just makes sense. When a crisis hits, you don't want to be scrambling for paperwork.
Exactly. And it's not even just about having the documents.
Yeah.
It's about understanding them, too. Knowing like the difference between a power of attorney for healthcare
Okay.
versus one for finances.
Right.
Those things can make a huge difference
Yeah.
when it comes to actually advocating for what your loved one wants.
Speaking of wishes,
Yeah.
that Today Show checklist also reminded me
Mm-hmm.
how important it is to talk about, end-of-life care.
Yes.
What are their preferences?
Those are tough conversations.
They are.
But they're so important.
Absolutely.
To have them while your loved one is still able to communicate. What do they want to happen if their heart stops?
Yeah.
Do they have specific wishes about pain management?
Right.
These are things we need to know
Yeah.
to honor their choices.
It's about making sure that their final days are as comfortable as possible
Exactly.
and peaceful and respecting their, autonomy.
Absolutely. And let's not forget about the financial side of caregiving.
Okay.
Even if you're not paying for professional care,
Right.
there are often hidden costs.
Yeah, that Steadfast Insurance Agency video
Yeah.
had some really interesting information
It did.
about how family caregivers can actually get paid
Yes.
for their services.
That could be huge for some people.
It could be a game changer.
Yeah. I was surprised to learn that in some cases, Medicaid can actually pay family members to provide care.
Really? I had no idea.
Yeah, it's a fairly new thing.
Okay.
And it's not available everywhere,
Right.
but it's definitely worth looking into,
Yeah.
especially if you're struggling financially.
And they also talked about the possibility of getting paid through a long-term care insurance policy.
Right. Not all policies cover that,
Okay.
but it's something to definitely ask about.
Yeah, it's good to know what your options are.
Absolutely check the details of your policy
Right.
or talk to your agent.
Because let's be real, caregiving is work.
It is.
It's demanding, it takes time.
It's a job.
It's a job, and it often requires, specific skills and knowledge.
Absolutely. And it deserves to be recognized
Yeah.
and compensated.
Right, whether it's through, government programs
Uh-huh.
or insurance benefits
Yeah.
or, direct payment from family members.
Exactly.
This deep dive has been really eye-opening.
Good. I'm glad.
Long-term care is just so much more
Yeah.
than just policies and numbers.
It's about real people
It is.
and their lives and their relationships,
Yeah.
their
Mhm.
hopes, their fears.
And it's about approaching this whole thing
Yeah.
with compassion and empathy
Absolutely.
and a real commitment to finding solutions,
Yeah.
that work for everybody involved.
That's what it's all about.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's
Yeah.
the one thing you want our listeners to take away from all of this?
I think the biggest thing is to remember that long-term care isn't just a destination.
Okay.
It's a journey.
I like that.
And it's a journey we can all navigate, with grace and resilience.
Yeah.
As long as we're informed and prepared
Right.
and we have the support that we need.
That's beautifully said.
Thank you.
And on that note, we'll leave you with this final thought.
Okay.
Don't wait for a crisis to hit before you start thinking about this stuff.
Right.
The time to plan is now.
Yes.
Talk to your loved ones. Explore your options.
Yeah.
And create a vision for the future
Yeah.
that really aligns with your values and your hopes and dreams.
I love it.